Good afternoon, everyone. See, we have a pretty good arsenal of attendees. Welcome to our webinar for navigating Saskatchewan Crown Land for energy producers. My name is Donnie Duncan. I'm the president and CEO of Millennium Land and your host for today. In this 25-minute or so presentation, you'll be provided with a brief overview of environmental process for energy projects that pertain to Crown Land in the province of Saskatchewan. Before I pass it off to our presenters, let me provide you with a little background on these two fine individuals. Craig Dowdswell, as our Vice President of Planning and Development for Environmental Services, Craig co-manages all day-to-day aspects and functions of our environmental team. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the University of Saskatchewan and is a technical agrologist through the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists. Craig's career spans 18 years servicing the energy industry, 15 of those with Millennium Land. Our other presenter is Brodie Graham. In conjunction with Craig, Brodie co-manages day-to-day operations of our environmental department in his role as the Vice President of Regulatory and Closure in Environmental Services. Brodie holds a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture from the University of Saskatchewan and is a professional agrologist and registered with the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists. Brodie's career spans 14 years, all of which have been with Millennium Land. Along with their vast experience in the Saskatchewan environmental space, these two fellows have a great sense of humor and a large, useless knowledge of movies, actors, and quotes. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, please put them in the Q&A chat at the top. I'll keep everybody muted and cameras off. And as time permits, I'll bring the questions forward. So with that, I'll pass it off to Brodie and Craig, and they can get started. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Donnie. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for signing in. So as the title says, today's session is going to focus on how to successfully plan and execute energy projects on Saskatchewan Crown Land. So this is primarily geared more towards oil and gas developments, but there is a lot of overlap with renewable or utility projects. Currently, the regulatory environment is tightening and environmental expectations are rising. We've found that most project delays stem from preventable early stage oversights. The goal is to show how early integration of land and environmental work keeps projects moving.
So why does this matter? As Craig stated previously, regulators are scrutinizing projects now more closely than ever, and the expectations around environmental stewardship continue to grow. Many of the delays you'll see happen because key steps such as desktop screening, biophysical surveys, or heritage reviews weren't started early enough. But the encouraging part is that most of these issues are avoidable with the right processes.
So just a little bit about who we are. Millennium Land has been operating in Saskatchewan for more than 25 years. We provide integrated land and environmental services across energy, utilities, renewables, and other infrastructure projects. Our focus is pretty simple. Keep your project moving by anticipating risks and coordinating the pieces that often fall through the cracks. We handle the land and environment so that you can build with confidence.
So just a little blurb here. It'd be a crime not to include a shameless self-plug of the services we can offer here at Millennium. So things we can provide from the pre-development side would be a desktop environmental screening, biophysical assessments, including rare wildlife and vegetation surveys, as well as wetland classification and delineation. We offer heritage screening and clearance, reclamation planning, and environmental monitoring and reporting. Please keep in mind, these are only the services that pertain to the environmental pre-development work. And if you have any questions about other work, do not hesitate to reach out.
Okay, so your typical Crown Land project follows a fairly predictable sequence. Once the project is kicked off, we'll complete an initial desktop screening to identify potential sensitivities and relay those onto the client. Once the project area is determined, survey clearances will be obtained from the landowners and occupants. All field work will then be completed, including surveying, heritage reviews, and the biophysical assessments. Once the field work is completed, we'll move into reporting and submission to the applicable governing bodies. Then, of course, we await receipt of the approvals and we distribute them as required when they come in. Next step is construction of the project, which generally includes an environmental monitoring component, and finally reclamation following project completion. So each stage builds on the last, and delays early in the process can ripple downstream.
We're just going to kind of drill into each one of these sections of the project lifestyle for the next few slides, starting with desktop screening. Desktop screening can be used to reduce costs associated with surveying and fieldwork, as preliminary identification of potential environmental sensitivities can help you with your project placement and also minimize the potential of having to relocate and resurvey the project. Desktop screening is our first and arguably our most important step. It identifies the environmental and regulatory constraints early, which reduces risk and prevents surprises later. Some steps that we employ in our desktop screening would be checking your wildlife sensitivities for known species sightings, predictive areas, suitable habitat, things like habisask and nature reserve explorer searches. We'll check through the wetlands and soils in the area, going through lots of different aerial photos of the project to observe the wetland and their state. Is it dry? When was it last farmed? And also screening our soils map through the SKSIS map viewer. Next, we go on to heritage concerns, which we screen the project through the HCB screening tool and send it on to a qualified archaeologist if required. Just a note on the heritage, all heritage screenings were on hold while the HCB updated their system. However, the new system is up and running as of February 4th, so we can submit again. Next up will be land use management concerns. Is your project located on grassland? Is it on cultivation, hayland? Is it Water Security Agency, DFO, ducks, Wildlife Habitat Protection Act? And a big one lately in the Southwest especially has been the federal critical habitat areas. So very important to note if your project is located in there right off the bat, so we can follow the correct pathway to get you approvals. Next, we look at topographical concerns. Are there any steep slopes or coulees in the area that we want to avoid, or anything else that could restrict the placement of your well or your access or your pipe? And finally, reclamation challenges. Not that this is actually something we can screen prior to the project, but we can use the information mentioned above to place your project in the best possible area, which in turn can and will reduce reclamation costs for the project.
Okay, so let's discuss integration. Land access and environmental approvals overlap more than many teams expect. Survey clearance is a key integration point. When land, environment, and engineering operate in silos, delays are almost always guaranteed. Early coordination will ensure efficient project placement or routing, reduced survey costs and approval bottlenecks, and ensures the correct areas are cleared for survey. Without coordination between the land and environmental team, some areas may be missed that are required for access or to avoid impacting sensitive terrain. Survey clearances require tight coordination between land agents, environmental specialists, and the engineering teams, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and the occupants and lessees. And as you can see, that's a lot of stakeholders. When planned early, timelines stay intact and field crews avoid costly remobilizations. Having early communication with the Crown Land occupants and lessees will avoid delays in obtaining consents. Occupants and lessees will have the best knowledge of the land to assist with access and routing.
Okay, on to the biggest section of them all, the wildlife and vegetation surveys. These surveys are governed by seasonal windows and species at risk considerations, with some surveys beginning as early as March 15th for specific species and some lasting into September. Regulators are raising expectations, as we said, so missing a survey window can potentially push a project back months or even until the next year. Therefore, early planning is essential. The Ministry of Environment does have specific species detection survey protocols which describe the ideal timing windows and environmental conditions for the surveys in order to ensure the highest potential for identifying species of conservation concern in the project area. Now, depending on the potential for a species in the area, we could require multiple survey visits throughout the spring and summer months, or some of them are just a one and done kind of survey. Prior to the surveys themselves, it's also a requirement to submit a species detection application form in order to obtain a permit to complete many of the surveys, which also takes time. Due to the timing windows for surveys, it's imperative that the project placement is determined early in the year. While surveys can be adjusted later to encompass larger areas, it can lead to increased costs due to additional field hours. Ideally, in a perfect world, survey plans would be submitted to the environmental consultant sometime in February or early March, so we can have our survey planning done before March 15th in case we need to get out there for those early season surveys. If projects are submitted later in the year, it can result in missed survey windows for specific species, and the project may not obtain approval from the Ministry of Environment.
So just a little note to touch on that with project timing. While it's possible that we find absolutely nothing during our species surveys, it's not really probable. Therefore, it's likely that projects will have a species-related timing setback somewhere between March 15th and August 31st. It is species dependent, but that date range is a good rule of thumb. Occasionally, when within native prairie, MOE or MOA may also request that the project be completed under reliably frozen conditions, which can push the project even further into the winter. Knowing these general obligations can help with the planning of the services in relation to the project.
Okay, so heritage clearance. Heritage reviews are a mandatory portion of your license submission and are required prior to any disturbance in your project area. Late discoveries could halt the project entirely, so early screening and timely field assessments will significantly reduce this risk. Many of your projects within provincial crown lands or any other projects located within native grass will likely be considered heritage sensitive, and as a result, they will need a heritage resource impact assessment or HRAA conducted, and occasionally a heritage monitor on site during construction. These assessments are required to be completed by a permitted archaeologist and are preferred to be completed under non-frozen or snow-covered conditions. Projects which are submitted late and miss the window without the snow may be subject to greatly increased costs, as sometimes you're going to have to get a plow in, remove all the snow off your project area, and then get a powered auger in there to complete the assessment. Yeah, so reclamation. It may fall under the end of life umbrella, but it's not really something to only think about during abandonment. It starts at the beginning. Key considerations should include, will your lease be a full push or can it be minimal disturbance? Where are you going to store your soils? Are you going to use geotech fabric under clay, etc.? Soil handling decisions that are determined at the start of a project can and will have a large impact on your reclamation success, and proper documentation of soil handling techniques will lead to faster reclamation. Also important to remember that if seeding is required in Crown Land, all seed blends must be approved by MOA personnel. It's also important to remember that seed is a finite resource, and therefore early planning is going to lead to the greatest chance of securing clean seed. If you are reaching out later in the year, there is a chance that suppliers will be out of a good number of seed lots, which could push things into the next year. Like I said, if all your requirements for reclamation are not prepared early, your timelines can get extended, and then your planned fall work could turn into a spring job very fast.
So most projects in Crown Land are going to be subject to environmental monitoring requirements by the Ministry of Environment and or the Ministry of Agriculture. An environmental monitor who meets the criteria established in SPIGEC Guideline Number 6 will be required on site during all phases of the project noted by MOE or MOA to ensure that there's compliance with the environmental standards. The monitor will carefully observe issues identified in submission and the implementation of the mitigative measures. If the mitigative measures are not proving to be as effective as originally planned, the monitor will consult with the site supervisor and/or applicable governing agencies as required and appropriate. Compliance with the environmental monitoring requirements reduces future risk and future scrutiny by governing bodies. One thing to note here is that MOE has issued proposed changes to the environmental obligation and permit conditions. So within these proposed changes is an overhaul to the monitoring requirements. So going forwards, it's looking like MOE is actually going to clearly lay out the aspects of the project requiring a monitor on site. It used to be very vague and kind of left up to the determination of the monitor, but now they're going to be spelling it out for us, which is fantastic. Environmental monitors are required to submit as-built construction reports to the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Agriculture following the completion of the project. The as-built reports will document all construction activities completed for the project and outline any environmental concerns and the mitigation that was implemented. One recurring compliance issue we've identified during monitoring activities is that the requirement to ensure all equipment is appropriately cleaned prior to entry into Crown lands. This sometimes comes as a shock to some of the proponents when they see this, and they weren't expecting to be spending this much time cleaning equipment. The biosecurity thing is becoming a major issue now. Expecting this obligation within the well license would improve advanced planning for rig and equipment rotations and reduce the likelihood of transferring soil, mud, or biological material from previously disturbed or high-risk areas onto Crown land. Given the increasing emphasis on biosecurity by both regulators and landowners, proactive equipment cleaning is an effective risk mitigation measure that can significantly reduce the potential for invasive species introduction and the associated long-term costs of veg management and remediation.
Yeah, that kind of wraps up the life cycle, and just want to jump into a quick note of some do's and don'ts for Saskatchewan Crown Land. Do start your screening early. This is going to give us lots of time to look at multiple locations if your first one's a dud. You know, if the project is kicked off too late, it can result in late desktop screening, which in turn is going to result in important environmental sensitivities being missed, such as certain species survey windows. Another do is to integrate land and environmental workflows. We have found that an open line of communication between the land and environmental groups is vital, as it ensures a steady flow of information regarding the project. If I'm out in the field and I need to move an access road, a lease boundary, or a well bore, that information can move quickly between the groups, and we can then receive the clearance to enter the adjacent lands quickly and efficiently. And our final do is plan reclamation from the start. It's going to give you your best chance of completing that rec work within a calendar year. And if your rec planning is left until the end, you may miss the opportunity to obtain MOA-approved seed and have a more in-depth weed management plan throughout that year while you have nothing growing. To move on to the don't, the biggest one is going to be do not assume approvals are automatic. Between the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, and the Heritage Conservation Branch, plan for about a month of lead time for the approval following submission of the report. Our next don't is going to be do not miss seasonal survey windows. If you miss those windows, then your project might be pushed into the following year, which could cause you some significant delays. Next will be don't delay your heritage reviews. Heritage reviews need to be completed early enough to identify potential impacts for the project, and it takes time to complete the fieldwork, reporting, and once again to wait for the approval from the HCB. And our final don't is please don't treat environmental work as an afterthought. There's a lot of work required from the environmental perspective to obtain Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Agriculture approval to work within Crown land, and the sooner we can get everything in order, the smoother your program is going to run.
All right, so touching on the shameless plug earlier, how can Millennium help with this? So we will provide a single point of contact for coordination. Whether you talk to one of our land agents, our environmental specialists, or even our administrative staff, The issue will be passed on to the correct manager to keep things moving. We'll provide you with proactive risk identification through desktop screening and help in determining the placement of the project to minimize potential impacts. We'll give you clear timelines and clear communication. So with an in-depth understanding of the environment and land requirements for work within Crown Lands, we can provide our clients with a realistic time frame for project completion and budgets. And finally, we have proven Crown Land experience for the past 25 years, resulting in strong stakeholder and landowner relations. Essentially, we live where we work, so we want our reputation to matter.
Okay, so yeah, some just quick takeaways to end us out here. First one will be early planning prevents delays, as we've stated multiple times throughout this quick little webinar. Remember the 5 Ps, right? Proper planning prevents poor performance. So if you can get things in early, we're going to have a good shot of making sure your program goes smooth. Next one would be maintaining integration between land and environmental teams. It's pretty essential because there's nothing worse than needing to access a piece of land while you're in the field, but you don't have permission to access it. So by keeping those communication lanes open, we can ensure that gets done easily. And finally, most Crown Land issues are avoidable if you follow the correct process. So it's not a big scary thing to get done. We just got to do it the right way and get your approvals.
Yeah, so in closing, we welcome any real-world scenarios and project questions. This is your chance to explore how these principles apply to your specific projects. Also, if you have any questions at all regarding the environmental process in Saskatchewan, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I don't see any questions, fellas, in the Q&A, but I have a couple for you. Just thought to add some clarity for the viewers. One, this is what you've just ran through is a typical process for projects on Crown Land as it pertains to the energy industry. Oh, hang on. Deneen just tapped something on there. Deneen's question in the chat is, do you have to follow guidelines for placement of pad sites and pipelines on Crown Land?
Yeah, there are some guidelines to follow. Basically, they're set by the Ministry of Energy and Resources for the most part. Regarding the Ministry of Environment, it's basically trying to restrict the potential impacts that you might have. So there's no specific placement, but avoiding wetlands, avoiding critical habitat, avoiding any kind of managed areas is kind of the biggest thing.
That answers your question. I was going to say this is a typical project or a typical scenario on Crown Land. What about some of the bigger projects like, wind generation where you have a bigger footprint, or more technical ones like SAGD operations? Is it the same process? Is it more complicated? I think I know the answer, but for our viewers, it would be a good learning tool for them if you can shorten that up.
Yeah, I'll take this, Brody. Really, that could be its own webinar to explain the complexities of larger projects. But the short answer is that depending on the type of project, it could be subject to further scrutiny by the Ministry of Environment's Environmental Assessment Branch. So as per the Environmental Assessment Act, the project could be subject to requiring either a technical project proposal, a TPP, or an environmental impact assessment, an EIA. There's a document available through Ministry of Environment which provides a breakdown of whether or not the project would be considered a development in the eyes of the ministry. The term development gets thrown around a lot when you're talking about any kind of project, but the ministry has its own term for development and what it's considered. It's broken down in the document. Yeah, so if you're unsure on their screening process, if you're unsure if your project's going to be a development, then the proponent can develop a technical project proposal and submit it to the ministry so they can determine if it falls within their criteria of a development. If they declare that it is a development, then the proponent will be required to do an environmental impact assessment and submit an environmental impact statement for review by the ministry. Alternatively, the proponent can elect to bypass the TPP portion and go directly to an EIA. But these are all very onerous projects, and they can include public consultation portions and potentially triggering the duty to consult with First Nations and Métis communities. So I guess the best approach really is, if you're unsure, is just to reach out to your environmental provider early, and they can help you along the way.
And typically when you do a run-of-the-mill project and you get your approvals in place, how long are those approvals good for?
1 year, usually 1 year from the date of issue on the approval would be a typical expiry.
Just to add on that, the ministry currently allows wildlife surveys to be current for up to 2 years. So if you complete it in 2026, you may not have to recomplete the wildlife surveys until 2028, but you still have to look for those seasonal survey windows and make sure you don't miss them, because you will also have those timing constraints on your construction.
In a perfect world, if I was planning a project on Saskatchewan Crown Land, you're saying kick this off and do your physical surveys, like you're send your surveyors out to the field in January, February, March, so you guys have a set plan for starting in April type thing?
Yes. Yeah, that is 100% correct. Start planning early. We can't emphasize it enough. It just makes everything so much easier down the road. If we have any questions that we need to clarify with the ministry regarding obligations for surveys, that gives us the time to sort them out, and then we can have them ready to roll for your project throughout the spring and summer.
There is
plan to develop. Sorry, Craig. Plan to develop my project the following fall or winter.
Yeah, ideally. I was going to say, there is potential that if you're not 100% certain on exactly where your project is, but you want it to be within, say, these 2 quarter sections, we can expand the survey areas so that we do cover that off. But like we said earlier, it's going to cost that many more field hours to have people surveying that much bigger of an area. And specifically for vegetation surveys, we need to have a actual footprint of the project so that we can survey the project and the buffer. There's usually a 30-meter buffer you have to survey around them.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the time and effort you've put into this. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. What we can do is we'll have Haley send an email out to everybody that's attended this with Craig and Brody and my contact information, should you have any questions going forward. Thanks again, guys, and we look forward to the next one.
Thanks everyone.
For tuning in.
Logging in.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Bye.